So, for these, when you are listening, you have to put your thoughts aside. It's the craziest thing because we want to give our feedback so quickly. Because we think that, we have a solution. Just here, take it. Solution, go. We have to put our thoughts aside. We have to know where they're coming from, how they process emotion. If we're processing emotion for them, how are they going to process emotion without you? If you're processing consequences, if you're processing how they feel about sex, drugs, and alcohol, if you're telling them, you're not allowing them to independently think. And so when we are listening, we have to put our thoughts aside for a little bit and ask the questions to get them to talk. In a book that I found called Raising Your Out of Control Child, it's a great title. I'll show you the book. This is something that the author said. You must gain some understanding of why your child is behaving the way he does. Because I hear this way too often. Oh, they're just a typical teenager. Okay, well guess what? Typical teenager nowadays is cutting and feeling depressed. And if that's typical, then we got a big problem. Then we got a huge problem. And so that's why when we are listening to them, even me as a mentor, you as a parent, me as a mentor, when we are listening to them, we have to understand where they're coming from. We have to understand why they are behaving and why they think the way they do. And that's how we do it, by asking questions. So we have to know, what are your child's options? If he comes home and says, Johnny offered weed to me today, don't say, oh my gosh, Johnny's mom, blah, 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 Say like, whoa, what'd you do? What do you think about that? And then you go off and you call their parents and say, little Johnny tried to offer my But have that conversation with your child. And say, whoa, what'd you think about that? It's like, what do you know about weed? And he's going, oh my gosh. So, you have to know how they process emotion. You have to. Because if you're processing it for them, we're going to raise passive youth, again. Because they're going to want everyone else to think for them. You have to be able to help them through anger, help them through sadness, help them through depression. You have to figure out how they're dealing with it, how they process emotion. Your first blunt okay that you hear, you guys have had those conversations before where all of a sudden they're like, fine, okay, whatever you say, whatever. Apologize. Because what happened is that you just shut them down. Sometimes when we get on our rants, even me, when we get on our rants talking to middle school and high school kids, you'll hear that, cool, fine, yeah, that sounds good, okay. But then apologize. Then say, oh, sorry, I just put up a huge wall, I'm really sorry, please, let's get back on track. Because you want that conversation to continue. Because it was our fault. We said something that made them say, fine, I don't want to have this conversation right now. And it's like, oh, sorry. I'm really sorry, please, I want to continue this conversation. So, and make sure that both of you allow each other to complete each other's sentences. Because then how are you going to listen? And that's what we need to, and I'll be able to, actually I think that's the next slide. Next thing is make sure you don't put up walls, just like this. Don't put up walls with your kids. If you put up walls, they're not going to tell you anything. And we want to make that trusting relationship with them, even as a mentor. Even as a mentor, I can't put up walls because I want them to tell me what's going on so I can help them. Now the next one. These are 3 listening strategies. There are 3 different ways that we listen. The first one is empathetic. And that is associating with emotions. That is saying, oh my gosh, I know where you're coming from. Say, for instance, that they come up to you and they said, I smoked pot. Let's say, for instance, that you smoked pot once in your life. You can associate with that emotion. You can say to yourself, man, I remember what that was like. Oh, okay, now we're on the same page emotionally. I know what that was like. The next one is deliberative. Now, deliberative is associating with logic. This is the arguer in you. This is the one that wants to say, you're an idiot. It's just like, you thought that smoking weed would be a sweet idea? Wrong. That's the arguer in you, because there's no logic behind it. So this is the one that wants to just say, you're right, you're wrong. But the last one is called an active listener, and that's associating with understanding. This is making sure that your son or daughter understands what they just said to you. So if they said, oh yeah, smoking weed is sweet, be like, oh, well, why? And then they're like, oh, wait, it sucks. You're like, yeah, kind of. It's like, this is associating with understanding. Make sure they understand what they just said to you. Making sure that you understand what they just said to you. This is asking them questions like, whoa, 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 whoa. What do you mean? What do you mean by smoking weed is cool? This is you trying to understand and trying to get them to understand what they just said to you. These are the 3 ways that we listen. A good way to listen and to engage in conversation is having a mix of the three. You need to make sure that you can feel and understand their emotions. There needs to be a little bit of logic behind it, because if they're just making up stuff like, oh yeah, weed doesn't do anything to your brain. It's like, come with me. Google's really fun. You know, you can like benefits and not benefits of weed. So then you can say like logic done, but then you need to be able to have them understand why they are saying the things they are, and you need to understand where they're coming from. So the last one for listening, teach your child to listen. I think some of you just went, huh? Like, okay. Sometimes as mentors, as parents, they say things to us and all of a sudden we want to shut down, because it catches us off guard. We need to be able to say, I'm listening. Get it out. Especially when, like we were talking, when Barb was talking, she was talking about just wanting someone to be there for her so that she could just get everything out. As parents and as mentors, we have to be these people. Because if not, they're going to turn to their friends. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. We want them to be able to form positive friendships. But some of you know in this room that you don't approve of some of your son or daughter's friends. And I know that's true. And so I remember that, yes, I had my best friends, but the ones that I truly depended on to listen to me 100% were my parents. It was always my parents. I would know that I could go to my best friend and talk to him about whatever it was, but at the end of the day, if I wanted to make sure that someone was listening to me, it was my parents. Absolutely. And that's because they modeled how to listen. One thing that, happened, it's like this rule, let me speak first and then you can speak. It's making sure that we don't interrupt each other. Please, get out what you need to say. Now it's my turn. Then it's your turn. Then it's my turn. Let's go back and forth. Let's figure out how to do this. Sometimes my mom would say this to me. If I came up to her and said something that was wrong or weird, she would say, I would try to interrupt her. She said, let me speak first. It's okay, because I will give you a chance to speak again. Okay, let me finish. And so she modeled that. I was like, oh, okay, well then, because then my mom didn't interrupt me. Model good listening skills. Don't interrupt your child. We want to. We want to interrupt them when they're going down a conversation talking about how cool it was that all these friends were smoking weed or getting drunk and after prom was sweet and all that, and we just want to interrupt and say, hold on, what just happened? Model good listening skills. Let them finish. And then say, okay, so now I have a list of 30 things that I want to talk to you about, but at least they got it all out, because if you interrupted them, you're only going to know one thing. If you are able to listen to their entire time, then you're like, okay, now I got all the things that I need to talk to you about, as opposed to me interrupting you and getting the one, because then they shut down. So that's something that is important, is that we model good listening. And this is something that's important. Reiterate what your child just said. And you know why this is important? Because then you just told them that you listened to them. To be able to listen to your child and then reiterate what they said, that tells them, oh, wow, mom and dad just listened to me. To be like, oh man, I'm really sorry that you're having, trouble with your boyfriend or girlfriend. What do you think? What can I do? They're just like, oh wow, they're listening. Reiterate what they're saying, because they want to hear that. I want to hear that from my parents. And I know that my students want to hear that from you guys. So, now let's move to the last part, which is communicating. And this is sharing the drive. And this is the craziest story that I have to share about you, because it was kind of like an uh-oh moment in my life. When I was going out of college and starting full-time with Friends First, I moved to an apartment in Aurora. And when I got to my mom's house where all of my stuff was, I started packing everything up. And when we got everything ready to go, my mom said, well, okay, so just like when you were in school, just send me your schedule every week. And I was like, why? And let me tell you something, that was exactly how I said it. I was like, why?